Sorry. Okay, we're recording now. Hello, everyone. This is an informal meeting of sig-release, sig scalability, the CI signal and release team leads for 116. This is a meeting that will be recorded and available on the internet for perusal later. So please be mindful of what you say. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct. And in general, just be excellent to each other. All right. So I will give Marco a chance to kick it off. George, a chance to kick it off with any pressing CI signal concerns before we step into any agenda items.
So yeah, just to kick it off, Matt, if you have, we just wanted to know if you have any comments, any useful information on the failing jobs on master informing. Actually, one of them is flaking. But could you tell us if there's anything that we need to fix, anything that we have to hold off?
So from the two, like the correctness and the performance, like the correctness has been fixed in the meantime. We are not aware of any issues there, and like the last run is green, so I believe it should stay green. The performance one is flaky. But we are not aware of any issues that is release blocking now. Like those are problems more with tests than with Kubernetes itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't believe that there is an regression there.
Okay, that's super awesome. That's what we were worried about. So if the flakes are just normal flakes, that's great.
I mean, like yeah. It's obviously not where we would like to be with the flakes, and it became a little bit more flaky recently. But this is something we are looking into it, and we understand what is happening in those tests. And this, at least some of those issues are a little bit because we were unlucky and lucky before. Mm-hmm. So, like there are, like for example, there are a couple. At least couple of the failures that we've seen over the last like 2-3 weeks or something were because there was a single, like what we are splitting all the API requests per resource verb, resource, sub-resource and verb. And for some low count requests, like less than 100 calls per the whole test, 99th percentile, which we are focusing on, it means basically translates to max. And we've seen couple failures where there was literally one slow API call, but it failed into one of those like low latency requests, and like that was meaning max. Mm-hmm. So it's something we already have a plan how to fix it, and I hope it will be fixed by the end of this quarter. So. We are already doing it, but basically like the underlying point is that those are flakes and test issues, not like some regular problem with like Kubernetes itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Also, one last thing. So all the information that you just mentioned, is there some issue or some place in Kubernetes that you all have it all written down?
Good question. I think some of this is written, but I guess not everything, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me check if there is. I think there is a Kubernetes issue.
There is for sure, but I'm not sure how much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to. So when I look at issue on KK82182, I'm just looking at the agenda. You have referenced this network programming latency regressed in 5K node clusters, which links out to issue 82364, which I can also just throw in the chat. Can we just comment on that? Is this the issue that you believe is non-release blocking for 116? And that's going to take a little bit more work? Muted, maybe muted.
Sorry. The network programming latency thing is something that is definitely not blocking. It's not even an official SLO that we have. We are working to make that official SLO, but we started measuring it, but this can both be a problem with how we measure stuff. We are aware of some issues with how we measure stuff, so it shouldn't be blocking the release in my opinion.
Okay, so can I comment that on this issue? Because specifically that is linked off the failing, the scale performance testing. And is that why this is red? I mean, my only concern is if we leave it there and it keeps flaking or going red for this regression, I'm very concerned about, when we're looking at the test results, that something else pops up in there that you say, oh, that is release blocking. And we're not actually going to see it because we're like, well, they actually know that.
I think yeah. Like just to explain, like what I believe that it's possible that some of the components or some of the nodes started to be restarted more frequently or started being restarted because of some reason. And that may cause actually both of the issues, which is not strictly a scalability issues. It's like the reason for flakes or regression in the second part, but it's not per se a scalability issue. I think in theory, I can imagine that being release blocking, but not because of scalability reason, but because of like reliability reason.
Yeah, okay. I guess
we even consider blocking because of reliability.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing at the moment is we're probably not getting signal out of any other jobs that this is happening and that cause. So
which is not very surprising. Like we used to have that many releases ago also. Like I remember like 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, those kind of releases. We've been observing, we've caught a bunch of reliability issues where something was like being restarted or something like that. And we were catching that in scalability test only because like because of scale, like because we run like 5,000 of those, or like at that point, right, 2,000 or something. And the probability of like one node failing out of 2,000 is much higher than 1 of 3 or 1 of 5 or whatever we have in all those other tests. So,
yeah, okay.
So sorry, Lockie, go for it.
No, I think, my only real takeaway from this call is just be on alert. What we're trying to do is preemptively strike the chain of events that's happened for the last 2 releases, which is you rock up at the 11th hour and say, oh, release blocked. So where 9/16 is the tentative release date for 1.16. So just keep that in your mind as we go for the next 2 weeks. The only concern I have is that I think it's the correctness is flaky, right? So we look at it, it goes bad, it goes good. And the other one is, hey, there is some inherent regression that's non-release blocking if that changes. So my only statements to SIG scalability is, can we try and just over communicate for the next 2 weeks if we see anything? So, George from CI Signal is going to be extra diligent, but we're just trying to avoid the 11th hour Friday afternoon before we release saying, well, actually it's blocked and this is now going to take another week.
Sure.
Which I'm not saying anything. We're just trying to make sure that we at least have the lines of communication open. So I think 9/16 code Thor is next Tuesday, assuming everything looks green and we get everything that's sitting in the queue merged, which means then we're looking at cherry picks. So if there's any, just over pivot if you're worried about anything, over communicate if you think anything's coming, because I just want to make sure we try and avoid, obviously we can't guarantee, but by Tuesday next week, the release shouldn't change too much. Unless that was really my intention for the call. So I do appreciate you all coming, and this is our attempt just to bubble that up.
Sure.
So that was it from me. I think the only other bit I'd added to the agenda is we've made some decisions about master blocking criteria. The interesting thing I think that's more ongoing, and we can discuss this now, or in this call, is can we actually get these onto release blocking? And if the criteria is stable, let's figure out how to do that, because this is just a burden mentally for the people to come back and say, hey, we need to go talk to the SIG scalability team before 2 weeks out for release? And are we really going to be blocked? 11 days out.
So,
yes, thanks, Tim.
So I think like that, as we agreed on the criteria for release blocking, it will never become a release blocking because it would have to run every 3 hours or every whatever, I can't remember, some low number of hours, and just those tests take much longer.
So yeah, in that case, it's kind of like, does it, the problem with release informing informing and master is it's just a cesspit of things that are unloved and loved, and yours too need to be loved. And it's kind of like, how do we, that information is in your minds and my mind and George's, but it's very hard for us to carry that flag as we roll out of the release team. So, I'm wondering how we can make this more visible, and even to you, not to have to jump on this call every release and say, hello, remember us? Are you going to block on anything? The idea is that you know before this.
Related to that, the one big ask that I want to propose is, so CI signal, which the team should always be opening an issue whenever something in master informing master informing fails. And it will be really useful if anyone from SIG scalability could explicitly just say, okay, we know that this failure is happening, it's not release blocking, or it is release blocking, and if you are all aware of something that is going on, please link to any known any other issues or PRs that you have open. Just with that will really make it a lot simpler on the CI signal and release demand.
So
do we have a label?
Sorry?
Do we have a label like release blocking, so at least we can have a filter to say
you can open a release blocking issue. I don't know if we've done that in recent history, but I think a release blocking issue can block merges. I don't know how it works. There's some CI magic going on there, but we can look into it.
Yeah, I had no idea. That was even a thing. But usually, at least standard labeling techniques, anything that is labeled critical urgent and that has SIG scalability in them. Any comments that you all have, even if it's something really simple like we're looking at it, it's not release blocking, that will be really useful. Also a thing that we've been pushing is if we don't CI signal, if we don't get a response like 2 or 3 days, we just friendly drop it in Slack. So just to make sure that we cover all possible bases.
I think that's definitely reasonable to like require an action from us. My ask for you would be to file a separate issue for every failure, because like in general, like it's very frequent that like the same test, or I should put it in other words. So it's very rare that like the test is failing for the same reason multiple, like if it was red, green, and red, it's very rare that like those 2 failures are because of the same reason. So it would be like merging multiple failures into single issue. It may lead to us missing something.
Yep.
So it would be very like those tests are running like once per day, at least for now. So like I think it's not that big overhead to like open a separate one for every single failure. So that would be just my only ask with respect to that.
Awesome. Absolutely. Will do. And thank you very much for that. Honestly, wasn't aware that that is usually the case. But we'll make sure that happens in the future.
George, we need a point in the agenda about that, and we also need an action item to update the CI signal handbook to say that.
Writing on the agenda right now, and we'll follow up with the handbook thing.
Cool. So what I'm wondering on my end is that So, the release SIG and release team have this general idea of blocking and forming jobs. What we're wondering is there a definition, canonical definition somewhere for scalability, that there a list of criteria to say, like, we will block jobs on this criteria?
There is.
I think, okay, right. And
it's basically the list of SLOs that we have. I will.
Is it this?
Send the link, yes. Let me put it here. We may probably want to create a bit of simplified version of that just for those who are interested in like what is blocking, because it contains a bunch of like information, why and
right
and stuff like that. But
we essentially need a set of criteria that both release and scalability can agree on, and a place where it is deduped and highly visible.
That makes sense. Yep.
So I've got a question. Sorry if I missed this discussion earlier. Have we considered not entering, opening up the submit queue until we've got green signal from scalability, and using that as the signal for whether we want to open the submit queue again?
So I think as of now you have a green light from sig scalability. Like, even though like the recent failures are flags that we understand the reason, and those are not release blocking things.
Right. I mean, but it seems that whether we allow the rest of the community to move on in their thinking could be gated on whether we have agreement from sig scalability that things are good to go. Given at that point we're going to be doing cherry picks, which are hopefully much lower risk from a scalability standpoint. So rather we can just build this into the regular release process. So we don't have to think necessarily. I mean, obviously you can still block the release at the end of the release process, but here we could set aside some time specifically to look at the scalability runs, or to ensure that scalability is green before we open the submit queue and people stop thinking about this current release, or think about it less.
So sorry, I missed some of that. I kind of spaced out for a second, sorry. But we also don't run the scalability tests on the release job, on the release branches at least, right? So once they pass on master, we're assuming they're good.
Right. I mean, we can change that though, right? Because like, if we're trying to block the release on whether the scalability runs are good, it seems that we could target the branch that's about to be released.
Right. I was thinking in the past that maybe it makes more sense for them to target the release branch as opposed to the master branch. But I think there's also some gymnastics in between the time that like 116 doesn't exist versus like the release branch 116 doesn't exist versus release being on release 116 being on master. I'm not sure if we want to take on those gymnastics.
Yeah, I mean, we could also dupe the jobs, right? We could just request that we run.
No.
Well, I mean, like not easily, but if like it's a problem of money, we can find money, right? Like it's not like the CNCF is broke. Like there's like a process for requesting like additional resources. If it seems like it would produce a naturally better relationship between sig-release and sig-scalability and improve the quality of the product, it seems like a reasonable thing to do if it's just a question of money.
How can we ask for money?
Sorry,
go ahead.
We can ask the infra working group. We can make a direct request to the steering committee. I mean, we have avenues. I mean, I don't think that Google needs to be the only company footing the bill here. It's also not the only hyperscale platform where you can run several thousand nodes. For putting on my pivotal engineer hat, I mean, we had both a relationship with both Google and Amazon to run scalability tests for Cloud Foundry. So I feel like it is possible. I mean, there's also Azure, right?
Do you all want to make this an action item to follow up and try to see if we can get some extra funding to run scalability on other branches?
So let's I think we can take it as an action item. I think that, you know, one of the things that Caleb brought up, which I put later in the agenda, is resourcing, right? Are there places that people can be contributing that are not from Google to SIG scalability? In addition, there's also the idea of kind of like, how do we make sure that this feedback loop is even tighter? Because it's clear that this is like one of the things that will get us every release, right? So is it we have a SIG scalability advisor that lives on the release team, right? Or for a cycle, like you are our dedicated resource for SIG for SIG release. We expect you to X, right? Some level of criteria will respond in this many, you know, this many days or this many hours or something for issues. Or do we staff a role on the release team where that person is there? Do we give do we use the release team as an opportunity to maybe further resource SIG scalability, right? If there was a scalability role, if the CI signal role was extended into scalability, like I'm just throwing out ideas here, but it's clear that there is one. I mean, we also get bitten by this time zone shift, right? Where a majority of us are in US Eastern or US Pacific, or even EMEA. Like, it's still a stretch for us to be able to reach out to you in a timely manner. So I'm wondering what we can do moving into 117 to kind of alleviate that.
I think I would love to see us add a performance engineering role to the release team.
And further, like, does it make sense for it to be part of the release team? Does it make sense for it to be part of the release engineering sub-project, right? And have that be the funnel, and have that associate attend the release team meetings occasionally?
I think if we add a performance engineering role to the release team itself, then naturally they should be attending there. I do think it is a fairly specialized skill set. At least that's been my experience working with other performance engineers. So I can see the need for adding a formal role there. That's just my opinion.
It's funny that we have that we had the scalability chat today, because Tim and I were talking about something like this yesterday. So
yeah, I think at the high level it would make sense to me. I'm not sure what's the best way of doing that. I will think about it a little bit more, but yeah, at the high level, I think it would make sense to make a role as part of, well, I don't know, CI signal team or maybe sig-release. I don't know where it fits better, but
yeah, but I mean, I think we should all take the opportunity to think on it a little bit, because it is really clear that this will come up every cycle, and it kind of sucks, to be honest.
yeah, I also hope like it will become less of an issue with like scalability being more maturing in general, but yes, it will probably be like that for at least a release-ish or so, or more even.
Cool. All right, so the next one I had on the list was Golang testing, right? So this comes up every cycle as well, our Golang versioning. This comes up every cycle, and depending on the cycle, we may be on the threshold of moving into a place where our least recent release branch will be out of Go support. So we need a clear path forward on when we should bump these things, especially as we start to talk about potentially extending the support policy for sig-release, right? So that talk is happening in the LTS working group right now. It's like, do we extend to 14 months? I don't know, right? So that talk is still open, but that will, the way we handle external dependencies will definitely affect that discussion. So one of the things that I noticed is that the issue that's open for talking about exactly this thing, it was mentioned that, or rather a Golang issue was linked, right, about a 113 performance regression, right? And I was like, oh no, like that means we can't do this, right? We won't be able to do this soon or safely, right? And that's, knowing that is fine, at least. What I was a little dismayed about was the fact that that issue was open June 28th, and sig-release essentially has no awareness of this, right? So we were trying to make a decision towards the end of the cycle, and sig scalability is all over this issue, right? So this is something that we need to have visibility on.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I think that sorry, go ahead.
A clear action item for us, right? We can make sure, like, whenever we have issues like this in external dependencies, for example, Golang will make sure that we notify sig-release.
Right. So, and this will be specifically sig-release and the sig-release chairs as well as release engineering, because ultimately any external dependency, like, we're ultimately responsible for making sure it gets bumped or how it affects the release.
Yeah.
I think that the trick here is also that I was hoping that given that we already knew it like 2 months before the release, I was really hoping that we won't release Go with the regression, or at least or to put it in other words, like that when we release Go, we will know where we are with Kubernetes and we will be fine with respect to that. But because of like vacation period and like many people being off, both from Go side and our side, this wasn't what is happening. So it's also a bit of a lesson learned for us that we shouldn't assume things.
Yeah, because I see that this is currently targeted for Go 114, and we're like, okay, well, hopefully it'll be done by then. But it's kind of like, if you know about it and it can potentially affect us, just shoot it, because like a quick note would have.
That's for sure. But like, we met with Golang team just today, and we're actively working on that, on the Golang 113 performance issue. But just to add here, we also have plans to actually start or maybe add a continuous integration test for like new releases of Golang. To like anytime there's like a new version of Golang is supposed to be released, or before that, we want to run performance tests, testing how it affects Kubernetes.
And I mean, and this should be reasonably easy.
We still need to figure out some things here, but yeah, like, we definitely want to do that, and hopefully we'll tackle this in the next quarter or so.
Yeah, and not to downplay the difficulty of any of it. What I meant by easy was within test infra. So test infra images, Kubekins, E2E. There's a variance.yaml file, right? And one of the specifications within the variance.yaml file is an experimental, right? So experimental can be targeted arbitrarily to, like, if you want to bump Bazel or Go, right?
Yeah.
And the image will pick that up.
Because currently the Kubernetes doesn't build with Golang 113.
Right.
Because of this, some changes in how modules are handled.
Okay.
But, yeah, so it's not that simple, just like bumping a version and yeah.
I knew it wasn't just going to be that. I wanted to make sure that y'all knew about the variants in case.
Yeah. I already know about that. Like someone from, because I reached out to test infra, what will be the best way to actually start testing Golang continuously. And yeah, but we are on that. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Because at the baseline, I would want to see like an experimental for I guess a beta version of Golang, right, or something safe-ish, and then also a scalability one, scalability parallel for that.
Yeah. I think in general, like, we still have a bunch of work to do in this area, but like, I think we are in much better shape than we were like even with the previous Go release, because we at least knew that it has a regression. Like in all the previous releases, we were like starting any test.
Surprise!
Yes, it's definitely getting better, right?
Yeah. So okay.
So yeah, we are not where we would like to be, but like we are trying to figure out what's the best way to tackle that problem, and like experimenting and talking with Golang folks and
cool.
How to make that work in the future.
So I think that, in terms of most of the external dependencies that we have, we don't, like, there's not too much friction in terms of bumping them and getting signal on that stuff, but again, like Golang is the biggest one.
Yeah.
And like the sooner we have information about that, the sooner we can like make quick decisions. Like we know this is not going in the release. Anyone who opens an issue about this, we can block on that and reference the performance regression issues, right? So.
Sure. Yep.
Cool. So I don't want to monopolize. I think we've got one more topic, but I want to give y'all an opportunity to anyone on the call who has ideas, things they want to discuss. Okay, all right. Well, so one more is, so the last topic is meeting cadence, right? So we, the first time we met, we kind of said like, this is semi-critical, like let's like sit down and talk about like what we can improve for the next cycle. I think that went great, and we had immediate action items for it. And I think, some of that has been going smoothly. Of course, there are always opportunities for improvement. Cleaning up some of what our test criteria looks like, getting more signal from you about what the what your test criteria looks like, when and if you should be blocking merges. But I think, this kind of interaction is good. So what should the meeting cadence be? How do we make sure that this feedback loop happens, right?
My personal feeling is that probably like, unless we need some ad hoc meetings, I would say like twice a quarter or twice per release or something like that, like somewhere around the, maybe not immediately of the beginning of the release, but close to beginning of the release cycle, to discuss whether something is planning to change, or what are the things that will change on both sides.
Okay, so I was thinking, yeah, I was thinking monthly. Mm-hmm. So that would end up just being one more meeting for the cycle, right? So we could meet at the beginning, or I guess after we set the release team, maybe, for the cycle. At least give them an opportunity to, introduce you to the new release lead, to the CI signal team, since you'll be working most closely with them, and then from there, do once a month after that, if that sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close to what I was thinking. So like 2 or 3 times doesn't change that much.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. So I second that.
Like we can probably, like, if it appears that
there's no agenda,
significantly improve over time, maybe and it's not needed, we can change that. But I think like for 117, for example, it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. All right. So anybody have anything else they want to talk about? I think we've got some solid action items here. And
yeah, I think everything looks good, and we have a good way to go forward with 117.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for the time. I know it's tricky time zones and all that stuff, but I appreciate everyone who popped into the meeting. I will see you at the next one.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.